Today's session is on designing scope and sequence using the new standards to support anchor standards and supporting standards. And now I would like to introduce our great presenter to you all, Dr. Diane Neubauer. Dr. Diane Neubauer completed her PhD in Foreign Language and English as a Second Language education at the University of Hawaii at University of Iowa in 2020. I was thinking about Hawaii. Never so sorry about that.
No, it's a lovely place to be, but I am in Iowa.
Yes, University of Iowa in 2022. She taught Mandarin Chinese for 10 years in K-12 schools, and she now teaches Mandarin Chinese online in small group classes. She also facilitates teacher training, teaches in university teacher education programs, and also involved in research related to classroom language teaching and learning. Some of you who came to the HALT 2023 Spring Conference might remember Diane. She was our keynote speaker and she did a workshop for all of us. And I heard great reviews about those presentation and keynotes. So she is, we're really fortunate that we're able to work with Diane to create the webinar sessions and resources to support our rollout efforts. So on that note, I'm gonna turn over to Diane and she's gonna walk us through the webinar. Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. And thank you all for coming today. And thank you for being a language teacher in the state of Hawaii. Your job is important, and I know that you're making a difference with your students. So I think that I have the slideshow opening, but I want to make sure there's enough time for you all to see it. Are you seeing the slide with me in front of it? If I could, yeah, okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. Great. So we're in session 1 on scope and sequence using the Hawaiʻi World-Readiness Standards for learning languages. And today our focus is just this part of 3 webinars on designing instruction. So tonight we're looking big picture, and we have 3 goals for the webinar today. So first, what is the process for using the Hawaiʻi World-Readiness Standards for learning languages to design scope and sequence for world language courses? So after this one, when you see that abbreviation, I'm going to call them the standards, just to make it a little simpler to say, but that's the full name up there. So that's what I mean by the standards when I say that. And then we're going to look at some of the tools available to help you with getting the big picture, like where are we going? And then how can you then build a scope and sequence that is going to build towards the goals for our language programs. And then we'll look at 3 examples of scope and sequence, one at the elementary and one at the middle school level, both of those in the novice range for beginning language learners, and one designed with high school students in mind at the intermediate range. And so this format has, I'm aiming for about 45 minutes of presentation. As we go, if questions come to mind, you might take notes or even put them into the chat message, and we'll spend time at the end specifically on questions. So let me double check my notes and make sure I haven't forgotten to say anything else to you about that. So yes, the other thing was as we go, I'll make some notes about my process of designing these so that you might have a sense of, hopefully a realistic sense of what kind of time is involved, what kinds of steps you can take specifically to make this feasible for you and your own course planning. Okay. So part 1, what is the process for using the standards to design scope and sequence for world language courses? So your first step is going to be looking at determining reasonable proficiency outcomes. So unlike maybe if you've planned based on a textbook before, you might have taken a list of vocabulary or grammar points that it teaches and kind of laid those out through the year. We're going to do it in a different way if you're using the standards to base your planning on. So you're going to take the outcomes that the wonderful group that has designed the standards for Hawaii, they have looked at other resources, other states, actual resources about what is a reasonable time to get to different levels of proficiency based on age and the language of instruction that you have. And also the prior experiences of students. If they already know a language that is very similar to the language you teach, they may be able to progress a bit more quickly than others. And so those are all important factors to take into account. Age, the instructional time is huge. Also the instructional schedule, really. If you have an hour per week, but only 1 day per week, you may need to plan a little differently than someone who sees their students for 20 minutes 3 times a week because of the gap between the times that you see your students. So there's a lot of reasons you would want to adjust. So as we look at scope and sequence examples, keep in mind this is generalized and not something you'd just pick up as is. You'd adjust it for these factors. So you'll look for those proficiency outcomes in the standards document, which we'll be looking at shortly. And then you have your kind of end goals. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to let you know, I also share the proficiency targets link in the chat box with everyone.
Excellent. Oh, great. Yeah. And then after you have those outcomes, you're thinking, okay, my students might reasonably be able to reach novice mid. My students are already coming in, they're in their second year. Maybe I can aim for novice high, intermediate low, if it's a language that is very similar to languages they already know. So you have your proficiency outcome aim, and then you want to find specific performance indicators. So in this, you're going to be looking for in that proficiency targets document, I believe, or at least in the standards document, which we're going to look at for sure in a few minutes, you can copy and paste specific performance indicators in the 3 modes of communication and in supporting standards as well. And so when I was doing this, I was going in through basing it off of the plans that have already been laid out by the state of Hawaii for what kinds of proficiency outcomes are reasonable for an age and amount of time in a school year. And then I started looking at that level of proficiency and pulling out specific performance indicators. So you'll see my example document that does some of that later on. And then you can copy and paste both the anchor standards, which relate to communication, and the 3 modes of communication, which we'll talk about in the future as well as we go through the webinar. And then we will, and then you can copy and paste from supporting standards, which are those in cultures, comparisons, communities, connections. There we go. The other 4 C's. If you're familiar with the 5 C's from ACTFL, these are the same that we're using in the standards for Hawaii. Okay, and then once you have pulled out those performance indicators, you want to design a scope and sequence plan that will give students opportunities to develop their proficiency, leading to the descriptions in the standards. So thinking about the second question, what resources are available to do this? The introductory website here by the Learning Design website, I'm going to go ahead and open that and switch my screen share view to Chrome. And let's see if it does what I want. I think so. Yeah, I think what I'm getting shown is that you're seeing the World Languages Learning Design site. Great. So if you're not yet familiar with this is just to familiarize you quickly with what that looks like. This site is great if you are new to thinking about your instructional goals, your teaching practices that contribute to the goal of language proficiency and communicative and cultural competence, use of the target language, instructional activities. As you scroll through there are pointing out things about the standards and the goals there. So if there's a lot of links down below to more details, and as well as to the first year rollout materials, which was talking about things like use of the target language in the classroom. So this is a great resource if what you're thinking of is to refresh your mind about what a proficiency-based curriculum would look like using the target language with students. So this is a great place for perspective on goals and principles. A second site that could be very helpful is the Kauai Resources site. And I'm going to show two parts of this especially. There's a homepage that kind of introduces you to things. What I find super useful here and very unique in other websites that I've seen is that there are strategies with a really condensed description of how to do the strategy, but there's also an example video with a teacher from Hawaii teaching their class and using that strategy. Or sometimes I think it's a clip from a HALT conference, from the Hawaii Association of Language Teachers conference. So those are things that you'll see there. Some of the same instructional strategies are those that I've suggested as a possibility in designing the example scope and sequence and the unit plans that will follow. And so that could be a great resource. If terms are unfamiliar, there's also this really helpful list of terms that you can see. So looking at ACTFL standards is there, and the Hawaii new standards are there, as well as a whole variety of other helpful terms. So I'm going to switch to my other view again. I think I have to stop share and then I'll reshare to go back to my slideshow. So those two sites can be both kind of big picture as well as then the step-by-step. There we go. So those links are going to be available to you in the slides that come after this presentation finishes. And then additionally, there's the standards document. I am going to shift back over to that. Let me double check. Yeah, just one note too, in looking at these standards, I'm going to be presuming that you have some familiarity with the principles, goals, and instructional strategies that would align with communication through the use and response to the use of the target language in the classroom setting. So to dive into details on that side, those two websites would be really helpful. So we will now look right at the standards document. So these are the updated ones from March 2022, designed by a team of Hawaii educators. And with these standards, we're aiming to align instruction with emphasis on understanding and using language rather than learning about language, or studying language forms is another way to think of that. So our goals are to develop students' proficiency in communicative and cultural competence. And you can download the standards at that link. And Emily informs me that if you've been teaching in Hawaii since last year, you may have a hard copy and printed out with that. So I'm going to browse through that document right now by sharing my screen with, well, actually, I might just, yeah, I'll do that. Okay. One moment, please. Because I think I didn't open that document yet. Let me find it on my screen and then I will share it with you. Yeah. So it's going to take me another moment because I did not prepare this one. This was the little piece of my webinar that I dropped, folks. I will be just one moment. I'll get to that website rather than the document itself. Got it. Okay, we're good. And I will reshare so you can see where I'm looking on the website again. Okay. So you should be seeing the document with the standards there. Okay, great. So just to browse through, if you have not had the opportunity to do that, there are a number of pages at the front. We're going to look a little bit at the details of the beginning here. Again, that's going to refresh our mind on what is language proficiency, what targets are, and what language performance is, what we can observe and evaluate in the classroom setting. And then some of the details of the standards come a little bit later. So I'm going to browse quickly through the first few pages and then jump to the section where we're going to find proficiency outcomes. So there's a number of details about how the standards were designed, how they align with ACTFL standards on language proficiency. And then the standards were helpfully designed with different languages in mind. So you may have a different proficiency target depending on the language of instruction. So those with an alphabetic writing system, with students we presume also have a home language with the same alphabet, can progress a little differently in reading than those with a non-alphabetic writing system like Korean or Chinese. And then there's also a set of standards for signed language, such as American Sign Language, which doesn't have the same standards regarding reading because it's a signed language instead of spoken. And so we'll keep on cruising through here. There's information about frequently asked questions. And then after the questions section, there's a couple blanks, and then we start to get to the organization of the standards. So as we think about the anchor standards, they are related to communication. We're thinking about 3 modes of communication, and I welcome questions at the end regarding this. Just as a quick overview, we're looking at interpretive communication, where the learner is interpreting, understanding what they hear or read or see in the case of a signed language. Interpersonal communication is unrehearsed talking with another person, interpreting and expressing meaning in between one or more people. And then presentational communication, where someone is presenting to others but not getting feedback about their presentation at that moment. So those are going to shape the anchor standards, and then the supporting goals, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. So as we browse through the next pages, we've got the anchor goals at the center, and those are the ones we're going to focus in on first. So we're going to see that there's a goal for communication. And then you're going to find the range of proficiency, starting with novice low and moving into the intermediate range, and then into higher and more advanced proficiency. Most of our students are probably going to be in novice and intermediate range, even if they're all the way through the end of the high school program. So typically we're going to be choosing something from here. So when we know the proficiency outcome that is reasonable for our students, we can go in and find the specific performance indicators for that level on specific standards related to communication. So here, like, I think that one is interpretive communication for that first one. Yeah, oh, it says it right there. So let me double check that I've got. Great. And then so you can see that you're going to see standards related to first interpretive communication, and you can find the novice to the intermediate into advanced levels and even superior level. Again, probably your students will be within somewhere in novice to intermediate range, typically, unless they're quite advanced. And then you'll see interpersonal communication, performance indicators, again, organized in that same way. And so there's different standards for interpersonal communication, and you can pull out those that relate to your target for your students. And then presentational communication and different subcomponents of that, specific aspects of presentational communication. So I think that was most of what I wanted to show there. So I'm going to jump back into my slideshow. Okay, so we've seen those resources, we've seen the standards document. And then the final thing that you'd probably want to do is your own documents for planning, scope, and sequence. I just used Word, but you may have your school providing a specific platform for you. However, you need to determine how to keep track of what your proficiency outcome goal is, and then the specific performance indicators that you're going to keep track of for each of your course levels. So once you have those performance indicators, you can set up that document to track those in an overall scope and sequence, and then design units within that, and then lessons within those units. So choosing goals that lead to proficiency helps us remember to plan around language functions and truly thematic units rather than lists of related vocabulary or grammar points. So we're looking for coherent themes that relate to some function of communication. Another way to think about a theme is something people find interesting to talk about. Like a cultural phenomenon or experiences people have had in their past or future goals that they have, comparing these things to themselves and others, and comparing between different cultures. So as we look at that I was keeping those kinds of themes in mind as I was designing the scope and sequence examples. So before I jump to those documents, I want to make sure that you know these are created in a general way, not with a specific classroom of students in mind or the specific hours of instructional time that you have. So they can't be taken as is for your own courses, but they're intended to be inspiration and a general model of one way that you could implement standards through the design of a scope and sequence. So they're also not entirely specific to one language, although I did choose whether I was thinking of an alphabetic language or a language with a different writing system from English. So I think we're ready to start looking at the first one. So the first of the three examples that I'll show is the elementary. We're thinking of grade 3 students, sort of picked middle of elementary school, and novice students, imagining that this be their very first exposure to the language of your classroom. So I am going to switch to that document. Let's see if it picked the right one to open first. I think what you should be seeing is indeed the elementary document. Can you confirm that? Awesome, awesome. Okay, so the layout here is going to have a little introduction about the students, about the instructional time that's available. For elementary, it's typical to have maybe 45 minutes of instructional time per week. So that leaves us with just about 29 hours of instructional time per school year. So keeping in mind that you just have a little bit of time, we want to make reasonable proficiency outcomes our aim. So some grade 3 classes might only complete 1 unit, maybe 2 units from the scope and sequence that I show here. Others that have more than that 29 hours might be able to do 3 or 4 units along the lines of what I've designed. So the proficiency goals are novice low to novice mid. And then the anchor and supporting standards are kind of listed there so that you've got those in your mind as you look through the scope and sequence. So there's a table that shows how the units relate to these different standards. And then throughout each unit, something that I'm also kind of taking for granted in the design here is that the students and the teacher are endeavoring to develop a classroom where the target language is not only what you're teaching, but it's also the way that you communicate in the classroom more and more. As a normal part of your classroom. So you would greet students at the door in the target language, initially helping them understand that so they know what you're saying. But as they become more able to understand your instructions in the target language, greetings in the target language, building rapport and relationships through asking them how they are in the target language. Those aren't necessarily the focus of a specific unit of study, or in my mind, even something that you necessarily have to teach and test right away. You can just use that as the environment of your classroom to communicate with students. So these units don't begin, for example, with greetings as the first unit, which is kind of a traditional textbook first unit. So you won't see that there, but I am thinking that you would be using those greetings with students. So I would include thoughtful use of a shared language such as English as well. So I'm not prohibiting use of a known language with your students, but thoughtful use of it so that more and more the environment in your classroom is high in target language and students understand you very well and can respond more and more in their own developing target language skills. So with that as the background, the units that I've designed for an elementary classroom were the first unit on the animals and their lives. And this also has a unit plan that is down below as a more fleshed out example. Students would learn about one animal that's important to a target language community, comparing facts about the animal and its life. Simply, I've actually done this with Mandarin Chinese total beginners, so it was a favorite kind of initial approach to teaching. And it allows us also to do something imaginary. The standards include both informational and imaginative or fictional texts as part of the standards. And so this is a way that you can both introduce real information to students and then creatively create an imagined animal with them. So that was one unit. And then from there, a unit about who am I, thinking about talking about themselves in some of the same ways, where they live, preferences they have, what they like to eat. Who is important in my life? So starting to think about the student's circle of care, family members, teachers, friends, people important in their lives, and being able to talk about some of those people. And then branching out into more specifically something about being a student in the school. And so we keep scrolling, there's the chart that compares all of the standards for both communication here in kind of pink, and then the supporting standards, the cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities standards. So I've estimated that not every single unit hits every one of those standards, but across a school year, you would want to be able to reach each of those standards in multiple ways, ideally, for the students. So there's a couple of those aligning standards to the different activities in one of the units. And then below that, oh, that's right. That's the full thing, right? The one that has, I'm thinking of the assessment. So there's the third webinar that will relate to this. Will have more fleshed out details about how those things would be assessed. And then I think the unit plan we'll see in the second webinar. So yeah, I've been full of the standards and the details of these things and sometimes mix up which one. So that was the elementary example. We're going to look next at the middle school. Let me do it that way. I got high school up first. Here we go. Jump back to, oh, and I closed it. One moment while I reopen the middle school example.
And while we wait,
Are you?
I inserted the
Yeah.
link to middle school example in the chat box.
Excellent, thank you. And I think you have middle school back up on screen. Is that right? Okay, great. So the same kind of introductory part here, describing the students, the class, the time. Now we're thinking maybe 120 hours of instructional time per year. So vastly different. And then middle school students are also developmentally a little different from elementary students. And so sometimes pacing is a little different. So we're still thinking novice low to novice mid outcomes, however. And so the same kind of layout is here, reminding us of the standards that we're thinking of, reminding us of that use of the target language as the communicative means in the classroom more and more. And then some of the units that are designed there. So I built the same first 4 units actually, but because we have so much more instructional time, we have a couple of additional ones. So after exploring kind of from the imaginative and factual thing about animals to things about self, to things about the people who care about that child, to school, into how we fit into the world, looking at target language communities and the home communities of the students involved, and then thinking about celebrations, things that are important in those. So again, there's a chart that helps to align those units with the standards that they may align with. Again, looking at not every single standard might be hit by every single unit, but across the school year, we're aiming to see a check somewhere in each of those columns. And then there's unit 2 activities that are broken down and connected to the standards that they would relate to. Okay, and just so you get a sense of length there. The third one then is the high school. And let's see if I accidentally closed it. No, okay, we got it. So again, same opening. We're estimating for high school students still about 120 hours of instructional time. But in my experience teaching both middle school and high school students are able to progress a little bit faster. And we're also treating this as a third year of their experience in the language. So we're imagining that they would have had 360 hours of class time by the end of this the school year that this scope and sequence could align with. So we're looking at a proficiency goal of intermediate, low, or mid, depending on the language of study. And again, there's a section on use of the target language as the communicative means in the classroom, as well as the language of study. And for this, then we're looking at quite different units because they have more language ability already. The instructional activities also are modified a bit more than what you would see with brand new novice learners of a language. So the unit design that I did there was using our free time, meeting new people, seeing new places, managing or maintaining friendships. So thinking of problem-solving skills, interpersonal skills, pragmatic skills, being culturally appropriate, in other words, being polite within the cultural context that they would use the language. And then making decisions and problem solving. And there's a unit plan that we'll see in the second webinar, I believe, Emily. Okay, she's nodding. And so we'll look at that in a little bit more detail there. And I have 6 units designed for a school year at high school level. Again, thinking that 120 hours of time, give or take, there might be time enough for that. Again, you would be adjusting and adapting to your own classes, thinking of your own students and what would be appropriate for your school setting. And remembering that this is like one way that you could carry out a standards-based approach to scope and sequence. And again, there's the chart about which standards relate to the different units across the year. And then in the specific unit that is more fleshed out, the activities within that unit and how they relate to standards. So I will jump back to my slides again. Okay, here we are. So we have seen the elementary school, middle school, and high school examples. And then in conclusion, we've looked at the process for using the standards to design scope and sequence, starting with thinking of the proficiency outcomes that are reasonable with the time frame you have, the age of students, the particular language you teach, and then looked at some of the tools. So we have the 2 sites, one from the Department of Education, looking at the big picture and the goals for language proficiency and cultural competence. The Kauai Resources site as a place that you could think about starting to fill in what instructional strategies would be useful to help get you towards those goals. And then we've looked at the 3 examples of scope and sequence, the elementary and middle school novice range students, and then the intermediate range high school example. So I think we're ready to open to questions, Emily. Is there anything before we start to take those?
Yes, I do want to just point out the elementary example. It has been updated to reflect that reading is not addressed in 3rd grade year 1. So I just wanted to share that information with those who are joining from elementary. If you refresh the link, you will see that the reading has been replaced by listening. Don't want to cause any alarm, but I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, because we have made changes to it, but those changes were not reflected on the scope and sequence yet. I just wanted to share that with the elementary teachers.
Yes, great. And I realized, I think my final slide is going to be, yeah, I will make sure I get your final slide in there, Emily. So I'm going to open that up. Can you start looking at if in the chat, if there's any questions to start addressing from there?
Yeah, so a lot of the questions that have been asked in the chat, they're about the standards document. So again, if you have not received a hard copy, please email me and let me know so I can send that to you. And if you want me to email you the link to the standards document from online, I can also do that. So I have written down a couple names that I will follow up with. And all the links shared today are linked in the slide deck, and I will send everyone a follow-up message afterwards with the link to the slide deck and the links to the examples. I
Yeah.
haven't seen any questions yet about the example documents or the process, but so if you have any questions, please feel free to share that in the chat box, or if you would like to unmute and share your question orally, that will be great too. Oh, thank you so much for asking that. This is not a credit for credit PD course. This is a non-credit. So you do not need to submit a portfolio for today's session. Yes. Any questions or comments about the example shared so far? And even the process that Diane went through to create these example documents?
Excuse me as I click through. There you go. I'll get that feedback link as well.
I don't really have a question. I really appreciate these documents. I am going to spend some time later when I have more time to kind of really go through them and look, but I really like the way that the units are laid out. I like the scope and sequence. I'm looking at it going, oh, this is really usable. I could do this. So it was
wonderful.
nice for me to see it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me know. This is kind of my first chance to have well, I've had a little bit of feedback from teachers, feedback from Emily and from the others at the department, but that's nice to hear. So
yeah, I feel like I need to spend a little more time with it, kind of slowly going through it to really fully digest it. But what I see so far, I'm feeling very open towards, and like, oh yeah, that's a good thing.
that's great.
Thank you.
Let's see, I see Lori has a question about, is the high school example just for first year? Actually, it's for third year. That one was designed for students that have a little more proficiency. So if you are teaching 9th grade high school, you might look at the middle school example because that would be more novice range. But you might think about if you teach an upper level, 3rd, 4th year, that intermediate example from the high school might be a little bit more applicable to that situation.
So the middle school one can be used like for the first 2 years, kind of.
I've designed it as if it was a year if you had 120 hours of time. So you would
okay, that makes sense.
adjust based on what you know of your students, the time that you have available. Like when I was last teaching at a high school level, we had 103 hours, and that really does make a huge difference. That might be one whole unit's cut. So whatever you need to do to be within reason, that's where you want to head. So again, it's really designed to be like here's a big picture example of how the steps would be carried out. And I will say, I really enjoyed the process of doing it. It really got me thinking though. So when that backwards design approach, I think the advantage there is it keeps us with that end goal in mind all the time. And so all of the decisions that we make on the way there are meant to align towards that outcome end. So it can be challenging, I think, if it's a new process. So looking at those, I hope, will be helpful as well as inspiring so that you can think about what might be possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Emily, I'm going to plug in the message that's on the bottom of this slide, so into the chat message, so people can access that link. Is this an okay time for that?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
one more question from Brenda in the chat. Thank you so much
I missed
for
that.
sharing.
Oh yeah, I see that now. Yeah. So how do teachers who are teaching all 4 levels on their own find or make the time to create all of the curriculum, scope, and sequences, units, and lessons? Will we have a chance in the future to share with each other? That part would be great for Emily. What I would say is, maybe Emily has input on this too. My thinking would be, if you are the sole teacher of your language at your school, finding other teachers within the state of Hawaii who are working on the same levels would be really, really helpful, so that you don't have to create everything on your own. Even if you do a little modification here and there. I taught 4 or 5 levels of Chinese most of the years that I was teaching K to 12, and I did design the whole program, but I didn't change everything all at once. And so I was rolling out things one at a time. I was using prior plans to help kind of scaffold me into little modifications of plans. So if you can think of it that way, in the same way that the state has rolled out the means by which to use these new standards in planning instruction, they didn't do it all in a month. I think that you would not want to stress yourself out by doing that all in a month, but that this is the aim, and taking little steps towards that is something you can continue to do over time. Emily, do you know about is there a future opportunity to share those kinds of things?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing from your own experiences how you're able to address the different levels and the strategies that you use. In terms of teacher collaboration opportunities, yes. So there will be more information coming out soon, but I am planning to have an opportunity for all the language teachers to convene together by language groups, and in the spirit of supporting each other with the standards rollout. So there will be future opportunities where you can meet with other teachers of the same languages together to work towards something together, and that include materials sharing, information sharing, resource sharing. So stay tuned for more information. The convening is scheduled to happen in one day in the summer and one day in the fall of the next school year.
Yeah, that's great. Great. And I see Mineko has listed that Japanese teachers from the Big Island have collaborated to create a curriculum. So that's awesome. So I'm glancing over at the chat again. Yep. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Well, we still have some time. I was going intentionally somewhat quickly through those examples. Should we look again at something a little bit longer? Or I know someone had asked about the high school example. We could jump back to that if you'd like to.
Oh, I see a thumbs up.
Okay, let's go back over to that then.
And while we switch back to the high school example, Xanthi, is that how you pronounce your name, Xanthi?
Yes.
Yes, Xanthi has requested if Japanese teachers on the Big Island could please contact her to be part of the collaboration, I assume, in response to the comment about the collaboration opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
So Mineko, might you be able to share the information with Xanthi?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sandy, are you a Japanese teacher?
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Give me the email address, and then I can give you the information, and then we can collaborate.
Okay, I put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
And Charlene Alvarado also said she's interested in getting the Japanese curriculum, specifically elementary. And Lori Takizawa.
Oh, okay. I teach high school high school, but if you don't mind, I can share. But I have to ask, other teachers as well. I have to get the, permission from them because it's not my, my curriculum, our curriculum. So yeah, email me. Oh, I'm gonna email you. If I can write the email address to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mahalo Mineko, for sharing this wonderful collaboration opportunity that you all are part of on Hawaii Island.
Let's see, and I was muted. So, okay, we're back to the high school example. As I go, if you have questions about it, I forgot to say one thing that can be useful is down at the bottom of your video windows, like below everyone's video windows, there is a reactions option. And in reactions, there's a raise hand feature. I just put it on mine so you can see that little hand. If you have questions and would like to come on mic, you can use that and it'll put you in the order of who raised their hand first. So that as I go through this, if you have specific questions as we go, that would be great. So let me turn off my hand raise. Lower my hand. There we go. Okay. So in this, the high school example, we're thinking of intermediate low, intermediate mid, depending on language. And we're presuming that the students have had the equivalent of at least 2 years of instructional time in a high school program in that same language. So they're at level 3. They already know quite a bit of language, hopefully. And the example here has been written with about 120 hours of instructional time per school year, or about 200 minutes of time per week. So you want to adjust accordingly if you have less time on task with your students. And then the goal again there would be intermediate low to mid. And then there's a descriptor, or the detailed descriptions of the standards, and then the proficiency descriptors and the performance indicators that relate to that are in that document, in the standards document we looked at a little while ago. And so that the first year of instruction, we're looking at novice low to mid, but the classroom activities would actually push a little bit past that. Likewise here, with intermediate low to mid as the outcome, we might see some things that they're doing in class where the teacher's supporting and helping and doing a lot of modeling and interacting with students. They can maybe push into some of the language functions that are more like intermediate high. The goal there being to help more students to achieve the target that's just under that, and maybe some to achieve a little bit past what the proficiency target is. And then I had talked about this in some detail with the elementary. This is that same message about the use of the target language in the classroom. And then the use of English and other helpful scaffolds that help to make communicative use of the target language comprehensible. Then my thinking about this was, I was thinking both in terms of like my own Mandarin Chinese experience with more upper level students, as I think of your 3 high school, your 4 high school as upper level, and also thinking of what I've seen French or Spanish teachers do with thinking of more complex language at that level. So being able to do more prediction, to do more comparison, to do more time frames and more control of different time frames. In Chinese, it feels a little different there, but we would be looking at more complex ways to specify when something was completed or how something was completed in Chinese. So I'm thinking about that first unit, looking at their students with their own habits and preferences for what they do outside of school, determining things about how active or indoorsy they and their classmates are, and comparing to the habits of preferences of target language communities. So if you can find out things about what's happening in a target language community or communities, and then compare the students. So it's simple kind of poll tasks. So kind of an input-based task approach in that unit, and then consider advantages and disadvantages of the choices that they make, how they might make healthy choices for the use of free time, sleep, eating habits, the reasons that they might do one or another thing, because they feel tired, they still sleep, or, you know, like that kind of thing. So being able to give an account, to give reason, to maybe even to move into argumentation a little bit, being able to say why it's a good idea to do this or that choice, or why something they don't do is something that they won't do because they prefer to that. So some of those kinds of language functions can come into that kind of a unit. Thinking level 3, they're going to be more ready for that level of complexity in the language. And I see there's just a couple more minutes before our hour. Should I keep going, folks? Or Anna, you have a question?
Yes, I was thinking here that in our school we have Japanese, we have Spanish, and we have this year for the first time Hawaiian. So what I wanted to know is if we have, I don't know, Emily, that would be a question for you too. Do we have a curriculum for Hawaiian?
I'll let Emily address that.
Yeah, so the curriculum is based on a schools, based on the teachers. From the state office, there's no established curriculum that Hawaiian teachers use. It's whatever the teachers at the school have chosen to use. We do have some Olelo Hawaii teachers in the room here. I'm wondering if they want to share about what curriculum you use to teach Olelo Hawaii. We have the standards, which provide the framework on the scope of the instruction. But in terms of the curriculum, it depends on the school. Anyone who would like to share a little bit about the curriculum that you use for Olelo Hawaii?
Aloha, I'm Hulali. I teach Olelo Hawaii at Baldwin here on Maui. I just kind of took from various sources and put together what I thought would work best for my haumana. So to answer your question, I don't have anything set, or that was something that was set in stone and passed down to me when I started. But we can definitely work towards that, especially now that we have these resources. So mahalo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the goal with the standards and the materials that we've been preparing is not so much to say this is the way you need to carry it out, but to say this is a possible way to carry it out. And so, yeah, developing what you've got is great.
Mahalo for the question, Anna. Yeah, so, we hope that these examples will spark some new ideas for you all in terms of thinking of ways that you can use the new standards to plan for instruction. And definitely you can see how, these examples could be modified to fit your needs and your students' needs. Yeah. Diane, might you be able to share the last slide for today's webinar?
Oh,
So
yes,
we
I forgot about that.
Upcoming opportunities.
Yeah.
So again, all the slide deck and everything will be shared with you after the session is over, and you will have access to all the links, including links to the example documents. So if you are unable to access the links during the session, those will be shared with you afterwards. Just wanted to give you an overview of upcoming PD opportunities. So today is the first of 3 sessions. Today focus is scope and sequence. Next Thursday, the focus is going to be on designing units and lessons. So drawing on the scope and sequence that Diane has shared today, we're going to go deeper into one of the units from each example. So I think you all have registered for session 2, but if you have colleagues who haven't registered, please let them know today is the last day. So use the link there and I will share everything with you later on. The following Thursday, the 28th, will be our last of the 3 sessions, and the focus is on performance-based assessment. And we also have recently rolled out a PD opportunity, non-credit PD opportunity, again, to support everyone to understand the different proficiency levels. So we are offering all world languages teachers access to an asynchronous online training called Avant Advanced. So those who are familiar with the seal of biliteracy, you are probably familiar with the Avant assessment. So this is the same training program that Avant has designed for world languages teachers. It is an asynchronous online training that you do on your own to understand what the levels are and practice rating student writing samples for your target language. So if you're interested in this, you can visit the link here that you will get when you get the slide deck to find out more information and register. And then last but not least, quarterly meetup sessions. If you remember, every year we have virtual meetup sessions every quarter. As a way for us to come together and share ideas. So we will have those again this year. This year, each of the quarterly meetup session will focus on one of the 3 topics that we have with Diane. So in the October session, the focus will be on the scope and sequence. And the intention is that we can come together and share ideas, share what you have created, get feedback, ask questions with each other so we can dive more deeply into the examples and resources. So October is the scope and sequence, December is units and lessons, and then February is performance-based assessment. And the April one is going to be a venue for teachers to share some projects that they have worked on. That's to be determined, but more information will be out soon. So again, when you get the slide deck, you can visit the link here to sign up for the quarterly meetup session. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and asking really great questions. And thank you so much, Diane, for sharing your time with us and creating these wonderful resources for our teachers.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege. I'm happy to serve you all.
Take good care, everyone. Have a great evening and see you all next Thursday.